The Stillwater Planning Commission meeting of November 5th, 2019 is called to order. Let me go over the format of this meeting tonight. I will call the agenda items. The commission will hear briefly from the staff first, then the applicant or representative, then open a public hearing here for those in favor and or in opposition of the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed. We will hear closing remarks and alternatives from the staff, and then followed by a vote. Public hearings, item 2A, LW Development LLC, preliminary plat SUB 1914, requesting review and approval for a new residential subdivision consisting of 120 residential lots and 12 out lots at the property located at northeast corner of North Jardel and East 19th Avenue, currently addressed as 1805 South Jardel Road. No zoning applies that is outside limits, but connecting to city utility services.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. Ryan Harkins, Community Development. Stillwater Springs is a preliminary plat proposal for the corner near the corner of 19th and Jardot. As it's mentioned, it is outside of the city limits. They are bringing this matter as a preliminary plat proposal to you because they're tapping into city services, and under the subdivision regulations, that would have to come before you for approval. It's a unique caveat, but that is part of the code requirements. So this is the area map showing the subject property in the hatched pattern in yellow. You can see, again, it is just outside. There's a gap in property between the corporate boundary and the closest point of this proposed subdivision. It will have two access points off of 19th Street. This gives you a bit of a different perspective from the aerial. This is street view of the proposed plat area. The proposed plat is actually in your packet. They are proposing 120 lots, basically to essentially wrap around the area as you see here. So one access point would be from this side of the development. The other would be on the east side, and the interior streets would curve around with some knuckles and cul-de-sacs. At this point, I'm going to ask the applicant or the representative to come forward and explain more of their proposal to you.
Hello, my name is Alex Mendoza, and I'm here with LW Development, representing the homeowner or the owner, Lance Wendell. He wasn't able to be here, and we're located at 600 South Washington, Ardmore. Sorry, I've never done this before. You guys ask me questions, or do I explain?
Just give us a short explanation of what you want to do.
It's 120. It's 120 houses. I'm sorry, 130 single-family lots, and we'll be building anywhere from 3 to 4 bedroom houses.
Are there any questions of the applicant?
I noticed the road was unpaved at 19th on there. Is that paving going to be done at your expense or the city's expense? How is that going to be done? Well, it's out of city limits, so it's not our expense. So there's access for 120 homes on a gravel road?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, all the interior roads will be paved to city standards.
No plans at all of doing any paving in the future?
So far, no.
Okay. Do you plan to do any phasing on this? You're not going to get in there and do one phase and not complete the rest until the first phase is finished?
No, our plan is to build all 120 at the same time.
Okay.
Any other questions, applicant or staff?
Just as some additional background on the proposed development, the applicant is actually looking at developing these 120 units originally as rentals using affordable housing tax credits. They would hold them in ownership and rent them out for a period of up to 10 years, at which point the single-family dwelling units could be sold. It'd be using a similar tax credit program that is done on a rental basis, more with multifamily residential units. In this case, this developer does the process using those tax credits for single-family structures as a different approach. But this is something they've done in other communities across the state. So they're just basically looking at Stillwater as doing this type of development here.
Okay.
Any questions?
Since it's not under any zoning things, does it still have drainage requirements and things of that sort that they would have to satisfy the city's requirements on all that, or?
They would have to satisfy all the requirements of the subdivision regulations. So it still goes through the internal review process.
Okay.
City staff do a thorough review of that. So drainage, transportation, fire, all of those units within the city take a look at the development. So even though there's no zoning involved, they still have to meet subdivision requirements and building code requirements.
Okay.
Has there been any talk of annexation?
I believe initially there was. Because there's a gap in property and it's not adjacent to the corporate boundary, and that, as well as the costs associated with the annexation or coming up to city standards completely, the applicant has not pursued that at this time. I think they're waiting to see how things develop over time.
So would the county then be responsible for maintenance of the gravel road on that section of 19th?
It would remain a county road and county responsibility.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming up. I will officially open the public hearing. Is there anybody that'd like to speak in favor of this item? Would you come on, and your name and address? And
I'm kind of on both sides, so. Bill Fleshew, 2123 Lydia Lane, Stillwater. I own all of the property to the north of this subject property, the entire length. And then plus what's going to Jardeau, because they're missing the piece between Jardeau as shown in that map. I own that piece also. Okay. In your packet, I believe, and what I saw online, it shows that they were going to pave 19th Street. So that might be something to look at, see if that is there or not. But my concern is that we've had water flow pressure problems out there in that area. And on 7/31, I called the city. We had no water in my mobile home park, because I've got the mobile home park, because they were opening water valves and flushing. They had to call their crew, tell them to shut down the water valves that they were flowing so hard. On 9/5, we had no water. Called the city. I was informed that it was because they were back flushing the sewer plant. Now this is two that I have documented on times and dates. There's been at least two more times in the last 4 or 5 months, because my residents start calling me, well, we don't have any water. And we're on the top of the hill, so we got a 6-inch main line that the city owns. It comes up to the top, then it flows over the hill. So we're not getting the pressure to the top whenever they're starting to do this. So my question is, with 120 new homes here, are we going to have sufficient pressures that we're not going to have a problem? Now, if the city's not doing something, we currently have no problems, if you see what I'm saying. I mean, we have perfect water pressure until the city starts doing something. So that's all I have to say. I mean, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you.
Anybody that would like to speak in favor? Is anybody like to speak against this project? Let me officially close the public hearing.
Okay, so in terms of findings, staff Staff has developed the findings that the plat is located, again, outside of the city limits. So it's subject to subdivision regulations, but not zoning requirements. The subdivision regulations also state that they would have to meet current building code requirements. Subdivisions over 30 lots are required by Land Development Code to have 2 points of access. They do have that. The comprehensive plan recommends industrial uses actually in this area, but the current land use is residential and agricultural. The comprehensive plan also indicates low density residential adjacent to this proposed location to the north. So staff feels like this would be a logical step in continued low density development. The proposed density is in alignment with the RSS zoning, even though it's outside of the city limits. With regard to alternatives, however, at this point, you can accept these findings and recommend approval as presented. You can find the request as not appropriate and recommend denial, or you can table this item to a date certain later if you feel there's additional information or questions to be answered. Any questions I
The
can...
water pressure issue this gentleman brought up, has that been looked at?
Water Utilities has done a flow analysis in that area, and they've determined there's sufficient flow. It does sound like we will need to touch base with them again. I think that information was something I don't think anyone knew until now. So we can relay that back to Water Utilities and ask them to take a look at, on the operational side, if there's things they can do to help make sure residents in that area are not inconvenienced when maintenance activities are underway.
Any other questions of the staff?
Well, just there seemed to be some confusion with regard to the paved or not paved. Sounds like it's not.
19th will not be paved. The staff report, when it mentions paving, is referencing the interior streets.
Any other questions? Any discussion from the Planning Commission or a motion?
I think it's a preliminary. I mean, obviously I have some concerns longer term with it, but I mean, for preliminary platting, for their ability to sort of start doing some of the work to see if it'll work or not, I'd be amenable to it, but I don't like that the road isn't paved. I just don't think that's not going to be able to work. They're long term. I have some concerns, but they're not enough for me to not feel like, at least in terms of preliminary platting, to be against it. But
Can we require them to pave 19th?
no.
Okay, I didn't think so.
I didn't think so.
Good question. Do I hear a motion?
So I move that we accept findings and approve the proposed preliminary plat as presented.
I second.
The motion is passed 4-0. Let's go to item 2B, Sacred Buds LLC specific use permit SUP 19-25, requesting review and approval to establish a medical marijuana dispensary on property addressed as 721 South Main Street in the Commercial Business District.
Okay, this is an SUP as stated for a dispensary, 721 South Main. The subject property is the hatch pattern that you see in black. It is essentially a block to the west of the municipal building that we're in right now. It's commercial business as well as public next to it. This gives you an aerial view of the actual building and the bay on Main that they're looking at the use in. And this gives you an idea of street view. With that, staff is going to step back and let the applicant come forward and make their presentation to you.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Reyes and I'm with Sacred Buds 721 South Main. So I am basically in the goal for a medical cannabis dispensary because my mother passed away from prescription medication. And so I feel that it'll really help our society as offering them green ways to reduce their chemical medication intake. And I think it would help people like me without seeing the struggles of their parents on medication that kind of alters their brain function. Cannabis does in certain ways, but we have CBD and other things that kind of combat the psychological effects of cannabis. And I think helping people understand the medicine and how not to get high but get the benefits of the medicine will be very beneficial to Stillwater in the community. So that's kind of my goal, is to help with that problem.
Any questions? No questions.
Okay,
Thank you very
thank you.
much. Let me officially open the public hearing. Is anybody in the audience for this or against this? Please come forward. Seeing no one, I'll officially close the public hearing.
So staff has developed the following findings. One, that state law allows for medical marijuana facilities like this. Two, the land development code allows medical marijuana dispensaries with a specific use permit in the commercial business zoning district. There's adequate parking either on street or behind on adjacent streets, as well as off-street parking. The applicant does currently have their state-issued license from OMMA to operate a dispensary. So with that, the alternatives that you have available are to accept the findings and recommend approval. You can find this is a request that is not appropriate and recommend denial, or you can table this item to a date certain later if you feel there's additional information needed. Any questions staff can answer at this time?
I had one question. I noticed that there was signage already on it saying that it was going, but we hadn't approved the thing. So is that allowed by code that you can put a sign up for something that hasn't been approved yet?
What they also had the sign that said coming soon. What this city has worked out with applicants in situations like this, if they're doing remodeling or things like that, or want to get some advertising up in advance, is that they agree that they will not open operations until the SUP is approved by the city council, and they have the SUP form in their hand. But building permits and things, signage permits have been issued so that they can get a jump start on getting things ordered and materials taken care of and things like that.
Okay.
Any other questions I can
Any
answer?
questions?
No.
All right,
Any
thank you.
discussion, or do I hear a motion?
I'd move that we accept the findings and recommend the city council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented.
Second.
Let's vote. Motion passes 4-0. Item 2C, KMR Development LLC Map Amendment MA 19-08, requesting review and approval to rezone property currently addressed as 906 East Swim Avenue from residential two-family to residential single-family small lot.
Yes. This is a follow-up item from a subdivision case that had come through the city. This is on Lakeview, around Lakeview and Swim on the east side of town. The subject property is the hatch pattern here, so this may help jog your memory. There's residential or RSS zoning on the north and south. This gives you an aerial view at a very steep angle. And then this is the street view of the subject property. So this is the west end of the subject property where the drainage detention area would be. The lots being developed would be to the east. At this time, I'm going to let the applicant or their agent come forward and explain their proposal farther.
Good evening, Commissioners. Stephen Gose with Gose & Associates, 113 East 8th, here on behalf of our applicant. Ryan covered the majority of it. The RT allows single family, but there's a lot area difference. Our maximum lot areas are smaller than the 6,000 square feet required in the RT zoning district. So this takes it to RSS so that it's a minimum lot size of 5,000 square feet, which works with the layout of the preliminary plat you all approved last month. So, any questions?
Anybody got any questions?
There was some discussion about adding another cut to Lakeview to get access on Lakeview, a second entrance off Lakeview. Has there been any progress on that?
So there will be, as part of this project, we're going to have to build Grandview on the east side of the project. So that extension from, I just blanked on, whatever, taking Grandview all the way to, so there'll be Benjamin on the west side and Grandview on the east side. There won't be anything within the block that we're creating.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So, anything else? Thank you all.
Anything else? Thank you. Let me officially open the public hearing. Is there anybody in favor of this or against this that would like to come up and speak? Not seeing one, I'll officially close the public hearing.
So in terms of findings, staff has developed the following. Development code allows for construction of single-family lots in the RSS, and the map amendment is needed, as mentioned by the applicant's agent, to continue development of single-family residential units within the square footage and the bulk requirements for that zoning district. It is surrounded by RSS on multiple sides. The proposed use is the same as it was when the plat came through that was approved. Would also stipulate the comprehensive plan does allow for low-density residential uses in this area, according to the future land use plan. Having said that, alternatives equate to the following. You can accept them, the findings as presented, and recommend approval to City Council. If you feel the request is not appropriate, you can recommend denial. Or if you feel additional information is needed, you can table this item to a certain date. Any questions staff can answer at this time?
Any questions? Discussion, or do I hear a motion?
I'll move that we accept findings and recommend approval as presented.
Alex, I'll second that.
The motion passes 4-0. Item 2D, Natural Healing Remedies, LLC specific use permit, SUP 19-26. Requesting review and approval to establish a medical marijuana dispensary at property address is 211 North Perkins Avenue, Suite 36 in the Commercial Shopping District.
So this is another medical marijuana dispensary proposed, 211 North Perkins, as mentioned. This is in the Rosewood Hill Shopping Center. The actual subject area is in the black hatch pattern on the screen, as well as in your area map in the packet. You can see commercial shopping zoning surrounding this. There is additional residential nearby. This gives you an aerial view of the bay that's proposed, as well as street level. Having said that, staff is going to step aside and let the applicant or their agent explain their proposal further to you.
Good evening, Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here representing the business owners tonight. As Ryan mentioned, this is another empty space that a dispensary would like to go in and fill and contribute to the community. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. Any questions?
No question.
Thank you.
Let me officially open the public hearing. Is there anybody that wants to speak in favor or in opposition of this item? We're on 2D. That is correct. So not hearing anyone, I'll officially close the public hearing. Staff, you want to come up and go over the recommendations or the alternatives?
We can do both. So the findings that staff has issued are that the applicant does have their license to operate. They do have sufficient parking. The development code does allow this use with an SUP in this zoning district. And of course, obviously, the license is based on the fact that state law allows medical marijuana facilities. Having said that, you can, as far as alternatives, if you feel more information is needed, we can table the item to a certain date later. You can find that the request is not appropriate at this time and recommend denial, or you can accept the findings and recommend approval to City Council as presented. Any questions staff can answer at this time?
Any questions? Do I hear some discussion or hear a motion?
I move that we accept findings and recommend approval as presented.
Second that.
Motion passes 4-0. Item 2E, Silverton Estates LLC, final plat SUP 19-16, requesting review and approval of the final plat to create a residential subdivision of 42 lots, zone residential single-family small lot on property currently addressed as 1600 East Ransom Drive.
So this is a final plat proposal for Silverton Estates. You may remember preliminary plat had come through a couple of rounds with some delays on the schedule, and then was approved by Planning Commission with one request. The subject area is here in the hatch pattern. This is off of 17th and Payne, so you can see 19th here as well as Jardeau for the corporate limits. This is Couch Park over here. This gives you an aerial view of the property looking to the north. This is the proposed final plat. It is 42 lots as well as outlot areas, and then an interior street pattern. This gives you an idea at street level at the end of Payne what the property looks like. This is the area off by Couch Park looking toward the proposed secondary access off of Ransom. At this point in time, staff is going to yield the podium to the applicant and or their agent.
Good evening, Kelly Harris with Keystone Engineering, located at 923 South Lowry, here representing the owners tonight. The plat you see before you tonight is in line with the preliminary plat. With one obvious change, we were able to rotate the stormwater detention facility to be along the west property line. Previously, it was up in this corner, in the northwest corner. It has been rotated, and it is down in this location. We positioned it so that it was still north out of the floodplain area, but still providing detention for the subdivision. This was able to alleviate some of staff's concerns. We were able to address the rest of staff's drainage concerns this afternoon to a point where we feel comfortable bringing this plat before you tonight, that we don't see any major changes happening to it. The two comments that we took away from the previous Planning Commission meeting was the improving of Payne Street and easements to allow for future extensions of public utilities to the neighboring properties. On the item of Payne Street being brought up to city standards, after Planning Commission meeting, the owners and I were informed by the city attorney and city manager that this cannot be a project requirement since we don't trigger those requirements by code. Mr. McGrath may be able to speak more to that if you have questions on that. The other comment about easements, there are still a few minor comments to address from staff, but those do pertain to the easement widths of those easements that we're providing to the north. However, it's not going to change the overall theme of the plat, so we're still comfortable bringing that to you tonight. So we do ask that you would recommend conditional approval this evening based on those remaining staff comments being addressed. Do you have any questions?
Any questions?
You've added a lot since the last time it came before us, is that right?
We did. So the detention facility was previously located up in this area, and it was the width of 3 lots. So when we rotated it down to this area, that's where the extra lot is.
Any other questions? Let me officially,
Those 3 extra lots in the northwest corner of the subdivision, does that require any fill in there?
No, actually it's cut in that area.
any other questions? Thank you very much. Let
Thank
me
you.
officially open up the public hearing. Is there anybody here that would like to speak for or against this item?
Ray Bernard, 1602 South Payne. First, just a point of information on your report here at the start of it. Under the application process information, it says that letters are mailed to property owners within 300 feet. None of us received letters. I understand it's not a city code requirement for final plat approval. However, the only letter we got was back in August at the start of this. So had I not been paying attention and on my toes and checked the agenda Friday, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't know this hearing. My neighbors wouldn't know this hearing. A lot of them I didn't get told because I didn't know all the names. So you might look at that as just a courtesy in the future, even if you don't modify the code. Back to the issue on the same issues. Your discussion in your report, the overall character of the lot of the area is large lot residential, ranging from 1/2 to 5. This thing is still totally out of character with our neighborhood. I think that's reason enough not to allow it. She talked about Payne Street not triggering a requirement. It may not be by code, but I think it certainly should be for you to consider approval, because the city has come out and taken core samples of that road after the previous discussion about whether it would hold up the traffic, and so, you know, they found out how it's made, and it'll serve us well, but it'll go to a pot real quick with the additional traffic coming through there to serve this addition. Your third paragraph in your discussion talks about issues needing to be resolved dealing with drainage. We didn't hear any specifics. She said she thought things had worked out, but at the last time, at the preliminary hearing, if you'll remember, she was in a discussion with the city for cost sharing for improvement of Payne. So that obviously didn't happen, and I don't think it'd be right for that to fall back on us on the street. But obtaining a drainage easement, who do they need to obtain it from? Me? I haven't been talked to about one. I don't know. So I don't think anything's really changed on it. It's still out of character with the neighborhood. It'll change our lifestyle out there a lot. It'll interfere with the serenity in that neighborhood that we now enjoy. And our street's not adequate, not wide enough, and not built tough enough to put up with the additional traffic. I urge you to reject it. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Bradley. I live at 1611 South Payne Street within the neighborhood of the proposed development. Tonight we heard the engineer for the property saying that the drainage plan has now changed again as late as this afternoon. Since that drainage plan has changed, we've not had an opportunity to see the drawings or have discussions about it or visit with other people to see if it meets what we believe to be adequate for the neighborhood. So I would at least like to have some additional time before the board makes a commitment to this project one way or the other, that I'd be given a reasonable amount of time to seek an engineer to review the plans and concur with the findings of the project engineer. Thank you.
Greg Hale, 1424 South Jardo, abutting the far corner, our family property. My only comment is not that the development of but the density of the development. It will change the area and the community dramatically. It's totally out of character for the whole, anywhere in the area. And I think that should be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Anybody else that'd like to speak for or against this item?
My name's Glenn Hoffman, and I live at 1215 East 12th. And it concerns me a little bit with the drainage thing and all the flooding, now that they've taken and added another lot and basically reduced the amount of area over there that they're going to have for, you know, some of the drainage issues. I think they're trying to put too many lots in that area. I mean, if it was even half that, it would be, I think it would be adequate with what the rest of the area and that we live in has. I just don't think that the drainage and the traffic, it worries me with all the traffic, like you said, going down Payne. There's no way that many cars can go up and down Payne. The street's not there. I don't feel like the city should have to pay to fix that street. I feel like if they're going to end up having to put this in, they should have to be responsible for putting a street in. The taxpayer shouldn't, or the city shouldn't have to fix that street to put it in. And it's going to have to be fixed in order to have that many cars going in and out of it. And it's just a big concern to me with the drainage and with the traffic flow. So that's my.
Anybody else like to speak for or against this item? Does the applicant representative want to come up during the public hearing and say something?
Thank you. In regards to the drainage, that has to be reviewed by city staff, and we're not asking for any exceptions for that. We will meet all city codes in regards to drainage, and that's what I had talked about, getting to a point where that is approvable by city staff this afternoon, I believe. We wouldn't be here asking for the conditional approval tonight if we weren't to that point. Any other questions for me?
Any questions? Thank you very much. Let me close the public hearing, and the staff will give us the alternatives.
So the alternatives are that you can accept staff's findings and recommend approval as presented. You can find the request is not appropriate and recommend denial. You can table to a certain date if you feel there's more discussion. I believe if you need to recommend conditional approval, you can do that as well. Staff's findings are that as follows: the proposed final plat meets specific zoning requirements for RSS. The comprehensive plan indicates low density residential uses in this area. Currently, it is very low density, rural, agricultural. The proposed density is still within the alignment of the RSS zoning district. A portion of the platted area is within the designated floodplain and floodway, so floodplain development requirements would apply for that to that portion of the plat. The issues regarding drainage and infrastructure, as we mentioned when we developed these slides, still apply. They are working through some of them and continue to do so with city staff, particularly engineering and water utilities. With that, are there any questions of staff that I can answer?
Any questions of staff?
Just the comment about the road that legal had said that that's not something that's able to be, I wanted to just get some clarity on that. Why or why not, or what is it? Because it sounds like in our alternatives, if we don't approve, we have to specify deficiencies, but if it's not something required, I just wanted to know what more about that per se.
Oh, okay. So after the preliminary plat was approved, engineering staff went out, did core samples of the street. At that time, they felt like it had sufficient capacity to carry traffic. The city engineer determined that because it's a local street, that improvements, it was not a project they wanted to cost share in. If improvements were to be done to it, it would be as a street assessment project. So the adjacent property owners would be assessed for the cost, including properties along Payne Street as it's extended into this development, if it's approved.
So what I'm hearing, and let me clarify this, the city staff has gone out there, courted, and they believe this road has a sufficient structural capability to handle the future traffic and will not fall apart.
That's what we've been told. We've also been told that if there are damages that under code, that the cost would have to be dealt with by the responsible parties.
With assessments, it's not just the subdivision. It will be the adjoining property owners, these people.
If it's a street improvement project, yes, it would be paid for through an assessment of adjacent property owners.
Doesn't sound like it's in the subdivision at all. It sounds like it's just the Payne County, the people that live on Payne.
Well, remember, Payne is being extended into the proposed subdivision.
Yeah, okay.
So those lots along Payne as it's extended would be part of that assessment as well.
But the assessment cannot be used for maintenance purposes. So if it falls apart, it's 100% on the citywide taxpayer to go in there and fix it, unless you can prove that someone caused the damage.
I don't know if legal wants to jump in and add any more to it, but in a case like that, if under construction traffic, if it's damaged, staff's understanding is the contractor would be held responsible for damages.
Looks like they're doing in the heart of downtown with all the apartments going and holding the developer or the contractor or the construction company liable for the damage that's sustained during the construction phase or implementation stage. And we would go after the responsible party with the trucks and the equipment.
Let's say the trucks and equipment, there's no visible damage by the time the subdivision is finished, but yet there is damage shortly after they're complete and the road falls apart. A good portion of that is from construction traffic. Then who pays for it?
If it's traceable back to the construction traffic, yesterday, tomorrow, then that, my legal opinion would be to go after the construction company that did the damage. We understand that sometimes it's going to take a while for the damage to appear or to be obvious, but you have to go backwards and do an investigation to determine why it failed and who's responsible for the failure.
Is there a process then to assess culpability in that case?
It'd be on a case-by-case basis.
So in an instance like this, where this cumulative damage over a period of time will happen, and how do you determine that the majority of the damage occurred during the construction phase?
That'd be subjective.
Exactly. And there's been nothing done in terms of the widening of Payne Street, and that was a concern that was brought up in the preliminary plat hearing, if I remember correctly.
It was, and that was part of the discussion engineering staff and city manager's office had. That was their determination not to participate in any widening or pursue that at this time.
Let me ask another line of questions. So these proposed lots are smaller than the current lots out in this area, so there's a change in character. Is it legal and appropriate for us to turn down this plat because it is a change in character? Is that a rationale that we can use?
Under the subdivision regulations, if you feel it's not appropriate to approve the preliminary plat, you can recommend denial and then state your reasons for it. If you feel that is if you feel that is a reason, you are entitled as the Planning Commission to state so as part of your objection and your recommendation to deny.
Now, in your language, you use the word preliminary plat. This is the final
Excuse me, the
plat.
final plat.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I got
Understandable.
your
Words mean things.
words mean thing. Okay.
Under the current code, if you feel the proposed final plat does not meet code requirements or is not acceptable, you have the right to object or recommend denial. You have to state your objections as part of that. Essentially, you issue your own findings of fact.
Is there any other questions of the staff?
And if I can't answer it, we'll bring the applicant's agent back up and let them try and answer it.
Any other questions?
No questions of staff.
Okay. Thank you.
Discussion. Let me officially close the public hearing.
Well, like the objections I had in the prelim plat, I still have now. I don't think the scale of the subdivision is commensurate to the current scale of the neighborhood. I think the number of plots is too high. What that number should be, I don't know. Certainly much less than 40. I'm concerned with the condition of the street. I'm concerned with pain. I'm concerned with the lateral street that will be constructed. And I can understand the residents' concern over drainage, wanting to know a more definitive analysis of the revised drainage also.
Any other discussion?
No, I feel the same way. I think that's too many houses in that area, in that confined spot for what's already there. I could see if they had purchased some of the property to the north or to the north. There are 4 property owners there that have, I believe, 5 and 10 acre tracts that go all the way to 12th Street. If some of that were purchased, you could have a secondary entrance. But the way it's presented, I just don't feel like it's a fit.
And I just think that the road and access issues to that density, I mean, obviously if there's only 5 houses in there, I wouldn't have it worried about the road collapsing. So I mean, in some sense, I'm in accordance with you, but it's more a matter of, we already have this sort of a partial entrance, which was only going to be for fire. And I can deal with that if the rest of it was adequate, but it just sounds like it's just not adequate to my level. So.
Does the commissioner want to do a motion with a rationale?
I'll use alternative 2. I'll find the final plat does not conform to approved preliminary plat or codes, and the deficiency is the character due to the volume of housing in the subdivision, and thus table for 30 days for them to come up with an alternative. I think I have to specify, right, a date. I don't have a calendar to hand. I'm sorry, everyone. Let's see. December 3rd. And December 3rd.
There's second to the motion.
Excuse me, I'll second the motion.
Sorry.
Any other discussion?
No.
Let's vote. The motion passes 4-0. Item 3A, text amendment. TXT 19-03, text amendment for the Westwood Overlay District to amend the regulations in Chapter 23 Land Development Code, Article 13 Overlay Districts, Division 3 Westwood Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District, amending the regulations for off-street parking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is a text amendment that is being brought to you after discussions back and forth over the last almost a year between stakeholders in the Westwood overlay neighborhood and staff about some of the off-street parking issues. Some of the issues that have come up have been regarding the amount of pavement allowed as off-street parking. Residents from Westwood actually developed a proposal as a potential code amendment that was submitted to city staff that staff has reviewed, made some modifications to, and ran it back through the neighborhood and stakeholders to review, and they've signed off and they feel like it's an adequate proposal. That's why it's being brought to you. Just as a quick refresher, the area that's hatched is the Westwood Overlay District. The text amendment clarifies the off-street parking requirements. It clarifies a maximum percentage of the front yard that can be utilized for parking, and it eliminates the confusion between a maximum percentage and a maximum square footage that's allowed for off-street parking and that can be paved. Currently, if you look at that overlay district, there's a table that, when it talks about parking, specifies within the same table a maximum percentage as well as a maximum amount of square feet, and the two don't necessarily coincide. Which has been causing some confusion, particularly about which is more stringent. So this clarifies that. In terms of findings, current parking standards have been identified as being somewhat unclear, needing to be simplified. And the text amendment is needed to regulate that or to change that with regard to, again, through the process. This was brought to staff after a number of discussions back and forth by the neighborhood. Staff has tweaked their original ideas into the current code format. They've looked over it and feel it's adequate and a good proposal moving forward. Any questions I can answer before the public hearing?
Is this change more restrictive or just more clear?
More clear.
More clear. Okay.
Just real quick, educate me. Real clear in regards to what?
So it basically takes out the amount of, instead of having a maximum allowed percentage and a maximum square footage, it eliminates the maximum allowed square footage. So it's just a percentage.
Okay. All right.
That's how we try to clarify it.
Okay, thanks.
I think it also defines how that's measured, what parts are considered in the measurement.
Okay.
Any other questions, staff? Let me officially open up the public hearing. Is there anybody here to speak for or against this item? Not seeing anyone, I'll officially close the public hearing.
So in terms of alternatives, you can accept the findings and recommend the City Council approve the proposed text amendment that's presented. You can find that it's appropriate with identified amendments and recommend approval as amended. You can find that additional information or discussion is needed, and you can table the item to a future date certain, or you can find that it's not needed and not recommend approval to council. Any questions I can answer at this time?
Any other questions? Does the planning commissioners have any discussion, or do I hear a motion?
I move that we accept findings and recommend approval as presented.
Second that.
Let's vote. Motion passes 4-0. Item 4A, regular meeting summary of October 1st, 2019. Any discussion? Do I hear a motion?
I move to accept the meeting summary of the regular meeting of October 1st.
I second.
Motion passes 4-0. Item 5A, nomination and appointment of Planning Commission representative to the Boomer Lake Station Tax Increment Finance and Project Review Committee per Resolution CC 2019-22.
As part of the Boomer Lake redevelopment, City Council passed a resolution naming essentially a review committee to look at proposals as they come in for potential redevelopment and tax increment financing. The resolution stipulates that a member of the Planning Commission be involved as a member of that committee, and so that's why this item is before you. We need essentially a recommendation for a member of the Planning Commission to serve in that capacity on this committee.
Do I hear volunteer?
This would be the appropriate time to say not it.
To say what?
Not it.
He said it's appropriate time to not move forward.
I'd be at least interested, Chairman.
I would be interested, but
But if you'd like, if you can make it, I mean, they need a representative, just somebody who can make them. If you can do it, do it. But I think it's important that we have somebody from
I
our
agree.
commission on there, so
You were
please,
correct.
you like, or I can do it, whatever you'd like.
You
were
make the
first.
motion.
Yeah. I make a motion that Brad be appointed to this committee.
It's not the way I saw that going.
It moves pretty quick, doesn't it?
Do I hear a second?
Die for lack of second.
A second.
Let's vote. Motion passes 4-0. The next Planning Commission meeting is November 19, 2019. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. You gotta move fast here.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.